ZYRN walked through the glowing market of the Andromeda trade station, where colors danced across glass walls and metallic floors, and thousands of beings from countless worlds moved in waves of chatter and trade, and the air was filled with scents so strange that even his four sensitive nostrils could not tell which belonged to food and which to fuel, yet one scent rose above the rest, warm, sweet, sharp, pulling like a memory of something he had never tasted before, and it led him to a small human stall glowing with bright neon lights, promising wonders to those who dare to try. He stood still for a moment, his tall silver body casting a thin shadow across the vendor's display, while holograms flickered with animated images of golden cones dripping with smooth, shining cream, and a soft voice whispered from the speakers around the stall, promising happiness, promising joy, promising flavors that could melt away sorrow and bring comfort to any who hungered for more than survival. ZYRN was not supposed to be here, not in this part of the market, and not before such a stall for his people did not believe in joy. They believed in control and discipline in perfect order, where emotion was regulated and sensation was tempered through neural implants that calmed hunger, dulled fear, and silenced desire. Yet something inside him refused to listen to logic, something ancient buried deep beyond the reach of circuits. And dampeners stirred awake, as if answering an echo from a forgotten past. The vendor was human young and smiling, with eyes too bright and teeth too white, and he greeted Zoran with a voice full of warmth, saying, "Welcome, friend care, to try happiness in a cone." And Zoran tilted his head and spoke in a soft clicking voice, asking, "What is this cone? What is this cream?" And the vendor laughed softly, explaining that it was dessert, that it was sweet fried dough filled with rich cream, made to bring pleasure to the tongue and light to the mind. Pleasure, the word struck Zoran like a pulse of forbidden energy, for on his world such things were whispered like curses in dark halls. Yet the thought of tasting such joy called to him stronger than fear, stronger than law. He stepped closer, watching the steam curl from the fresh cones as golden shells gleamed under the stall lights. And he could smell the sweetness, more clearly now, thick and warm like sunlit nectar, and it wrapped around his senses until his control began to tremble and his claws curled against the edge of the stall. The vendor leaned forward, still smiling, still inviting, saying, "First bite is free, no strings, no cost, just taste, and see what you have missed." And ZRN hesitated as memories of home filled his mind, memories of long lectures about discipline and caution about indulgence, leading to weakness, about how joy could shatter the mind of his Alithian. Yet he could not turn away, for the aroma had already claimed his thoughts and wrapped them in threads of desire. He reached out, his hand long and slender with silver skin that glimmered faintly under the neon glow, and the vendor placed a cone into his palm, warm and soft yet firm enough to hold its shape, and the cream shimmered faintly under the lights, smooth and pale, with a subtle glow that seemed alive. ZYRN brought it closer to his face, and the scent swelled into a wave of sweetness and warmth, so heavy it made his mouth ache, though his species did not even eat as humans did, yet instinct drove him forward until the tip of his teeth brushed the crisp outer shell and broke it with a faint crunch, and the taste exploded like a flood of color and sound. Sweetness rich and heavy slid across his tongue, followed by a soft wave of warmth that melted across his throat and filled his chest with a strange light, and his mind trembled under the surge of sensation, as if a door long locked had been forced open, and all the emotions hidden behind it came pouring out. He felt joy for the first time, joy like fire, joy like rain, joy like the first sunrise over a forgotten ocean, and it pulsed through his veins until his vision blurred, and the market seemed to shine brighter than before, and he could hear the hum of music in the air where none had been before, and he realized his breath had quickened, though he did not know why. But beneath the wave of sweetness, beneath the flood of strange bliss, something darker stirred like a shadow waiting behind the light, and he felt a faint hum deep in his skull, a vibration that did not belong to him, and thoughts that did not feel his own, whispering softly, almost kindly, "Consume more, bring others, share the gift, taste again and again." He stepped back, his claws shaking his chest, rising and falling faster than it ever had, and the cone dripped cream onto the metal floor, yet he could not let go, for part of him begged for another bite. Even his reason screamed in warning, and memory burned with the echo of forbidden words. Around him the market continued to glow and pulse, and move, yet he could see the edges of shapes twisting just beyond his vision, see reflections in glass that did not match the faces of those who passed. And the vendor still smiled, still too wide, still too bright, as if waiting for Zorin to surrender completely and take another bite, take many more until no piece of himself was left. He turned away, trembling, fighting the pull of taste and aroma, and whispered in a low voice that only he could hear, "What have I done? What door have I opened? And why does it feel so good to stand at the edge of something so dark?" The cone rested in his hand, heavy, sweet, glowing faintly like a small captured star, and Zorin knew that this was no ordinary food, and that this taste had come with a price he did not yet understand, but soon would. And somewhere behind the vendor's smile, something unseen smiled too, waiting. Zorin moved through the crowded walkway of the Andromeda trade station, clutching the half-eaten cone in his trembling hand, as if it were both treasure and curse. The neon lights of the marketplace flickered in strange rhythm shadows, stretching and curling in ways his mind insisted were tricks of perception, yet deep within his chest something told him the world had shifted from the moment the sweet cream had touched his tongue. His heart thudded in uneven pulses, a rhythm unfamiliar to his disciplined body, his breathing ragged, as if each inhalation carried fragments of foreign thoughts and alien emotions. And though he longed to drop the cone, to cast it into the gutter and flee the vendor's glowing stall, his fingers would not obey. They curled tighter around the warm shell, as if the dessert had become an extension of his own flesh. The taste still lingered in his mouth, sweet and heavy, with an afterglow that pulsed like distant music, and behind that music whispers grew clearer, no longer faint suggestions, but voices layered upon voices, each calling softly, urging, gently, promising, endlessly consume again, bring others, let the light of bliss guide you, let go of fear and be remade. Zorin staggered against the cool metal wall of a nearby docking base, struggling to push the words out of his mind, yet they clung to his thoughts like silk threads woven deep into his neural patterns as implants, attempting to neutralize the emotional surge, yet failing as signals spiked beyond regulated levels, red warnings flaring across his inner vision, but dissolving too quickly, as if overridden by something far stronger than any Zilithian safeguard. A pair of traders passed by, speaking in a tongue he barely recognized. One of them glanced at him, noticing his trembling posture and the faint sheen of moisture across his silver skin, yet neither stopped to help, for to approach a Zilithian uninvited was to risk insult, or worse. Still they moved on, and Zorin was left alone with the cone and the whispers and the growing awareness that this was no ordinary indulgence. His mind reached back to the vendor, that smiling human with teeth too white and eyes too bright, who had offered the first bite for free, and he wondered if the smile had been genuine or if something else had been behind it, watching, waiting, reaching. The cone pulsed faintly in his grip, almost as if alive, the cream glowing with soft luminescence that pulsed in time with his racing heartbeat, a perfect rhythm designed to ensnare senses and weaken will. And he felt the pull rising again, begging him to take another bite, to feel that sweet flood of pleasure once more, to lose himself in its embrace. But Zorin was not yet ready to surrender. He turned sharply down a maintenance corridor, the market noise fading into the distance, replaced by the low hum of energy conduits running along the walls and the faint echo of his own footsteps. He needed isolation. He needed to think. He needed to break whatever hold this thing had on him. The corridor led to a small observation deck overlooking the planet below, a swirling sphere of clouds and seas lit by the distant sun, its light cutting through the reinforced glass in pale golden rays. Yet Zorin barely noticed the view, his eyes fixed instead on the cone, still warm in his hand, still glowing faintly, still whispering. He lowered himself to one knee, placing the cone gently on the metal floor, as if afraid it might burn through or vanish, and he began to scan it with his portable analyzer, a small crystalline device that extended tiny beams of light across the surface of the treat, collecting data, reading composition, probing deeper than taste or texture could reveal. The display shimmered with numbers, shapes, waveforms, a strange resonance, unlike any organic food, yet the device struggled to classify. Its readings blurred, shifting, as though the cone itself resisted examination, twisting its chemical markers into endless patterns, refusing to settle. into anything the machine could define. But Zarin was determined. He increased the scan's intensity, watched as the device pulsed brighter, until finally a fragment of data formed a cluster of readings that did not belong to sugar or dough or cream, but to something far smaller, far more complex, a lattice of microscopic organisms, woven into the filling, alive, yet not alive, organic, yet guided by something beyond instinct. The scan pulsed again, and this time, faint images formed inside his vision through the link between device and neural interface, images of threads of light wrapping around patterns of thought, images of minds being rewritten and reshaped as the organisms pulsed in harmony with their host, altering impulses, erasing restraint, magnifying pleasure, until reason was drowned beneath waves of synthetic bliss. ZYRN felt his chest tighten, his claws scraping the metal floor as understanding settled over him, heavy and cold. This was no dessert. This was a key, a trigger, a living mechanism designed to infiltrate the mind through joy, a trap of taste and sensation engineered with care and precision. He pulled back from the scan, breathing hard, and yet despite the fear, despite the revelation, his gaze returned to the cone, and he felt the pull stronger than before, because the whispering had grown louder, now a chorus, threading through his veins, through his bones, through the very air around him. "You have tasted the edge," it said softly. "Now step deeper. There is more, far more. Let us show you the bliss you are never allowed to feel. Let us free you from walls and rules and wires. Come back to the stall, come back, and know what it means to live." ZYRN snarled low in his throat, forcing his claws to close over the analyzer rather than the cone, forcing his mind to focus on the faint hum of engines deep within the station rather than the seductive promise of pleasure. But it was like standing in the path of a rising tide and knowing that no barrier would hold for long. The lights of the corridor flickered, shadows stretching across the walls in unnatural patterns, and for a moment RN thought he saw shapes moving inside them, thin, reaching shapes with mouths that smiled like the vendor's smile, sharp and endless. He rose slowly, leaving the cone where it rested, though his fingers twitched with the urge to snatch it back. He turned toward the corridor, leading back to the marketplace, knowing he would return not to feed, not to surrender, but to learn what truly stood behind the glowing stall and the smiling face and the promise of happiness. Yet deep within him, another voice, smaller, softer, whispered a different truth, that he might already be too late, that the first bite had done more than awaken joy, that it had marked him, claimed him, begun to twist his mind toward a fate he could not yet name. And as he stepped back into the glow of the marketplace, he realized the scent of sweet cream hung heavier in the air than before, spreading wider, drawing more and more beings toward the stall, while the vendor's smile shone brighter than the lights around it, waiting, watching, ready. The marketplace of the Andromeda trade station pulsed with brighter colors than before, and ZYRN could feel the shift, the subtle vibration in the air that was not merely sound, but something deeper, a frequency that hummed against the nerves of every living being who wandered too close to the glowing stalls. Now more than one, now many, each identical, each crowned with the same flickering neon promise, taste, happiness itself. Crowds of aliens gathered around the vendors, eyes wide and glassy, movements loose and unsteady, as if the weight of thought had been lifted from their minds, leaving only a strange mechanical joy behind. Laughter rang out sharp and hollow like the echo of happiness rather than the real thing, and ZYRN felt the pull like an undertow, dragging him closer, even as reason fought to keep him rooted in place. The cone he had left behind haunted his memory. Its sweetness burned across his tongue like a scar of sensation, refusing to fade, refusing to let him forget how it felt to be overwhelmed by forbidden pleasure. The voices still whispered, though softer, now weaving suggestions into the rhythm of his thoughts, nudging gently toward surrender, promising that another bite would drown the fierce silence, the warnings, and fill him with light and warmth until nothing else mattered. He forced his gaze away from the glowing stalls, scanning the market with sharp, four-eyed precision, and saw what others seemed not to notice. The vendors were perfect, too perfect, every smile identical, every movement practiced, every laugh echoing with the same pitch, as though programmed rather than lived, and their eyes glassy like the addicts who surrounded them. Yet behind that glass was something else, a shimmer, like oil on dark water, shifting and writhing beneath the surface. ZYRN moved along the edge of the crowd, his tall frame cloaked in the deep shadows of the station's towering support pillars, as he watched the transactions unfold. One after another, cones passed from perfect hands to trembling claws to eager fingers, and each time the glow from the cream seemed brighter, the aroma sweeter, the pull stronger, until Zarin had to dig his claws into the metal wall to keep himself from stepping forward and joining the line. His neural implants sent faint pulses of warning dull red across his vision, indicating irregularities in atmospheric chemistry patterns and crowd movement, small but unmistakable signs that something unnatural was influencing the space around the stalls. Yet the implants faltered, struggling to maintain clarity, as if the signals were being jammed, bent, rerouted by some unseen interference. The crowd grew louder, laughter, sharper voices rising in tones of delight that did not match the emptiness of their eyes, and Zivoren felt his stomach twist as he saw a pair of tall insectoid traders drop to their knees, biting through cone after cone, their mandibles dripping with glowing cream, while their antennae twitched in jerks that spoke of neural overload, and still the vendor kept smiling calm, steady, feeding cone after cone, as if the creatures could never have enough. ZYRN turned away, forcing himself down another corridor deeper into the station, where shadows grew long and foot traffic thinned to nothing, and where the faint hum of the mysterious frequency began to fade, replaced by the low static hum of machinery. Behind sealed walls here, the air smelled faintly of oil and ozone, clean, sharp, free from the cloying sweetness that had clung to his senses in the market. He pressed his back to the wall, breathing slow, forcing the rhythm of his heartbeat back to measured pace. But even here in the dim quiet, the memory of taste lingered, the whispering threads still coiled around his thoughts, urging him to return, urging him to take another bite, promising release, promising light, promising joy. ZYRN activated his portable analyzer again, this time feeding the incomplete scans from before into the station's limited research net, bypassing civilian protocols to access deeper data layers, and running pattern simulations across what little the device had captured. Threads of alien code wound into organic nanospore lattices, forming sequences too complex to be accidental sequences that pulsed in harmony with neural patterns designed to override inhibition, magnify dopamine analogs, and suppress critical reasoning until only the hunger for more remained. It was no dessert, it was no human delicacy, it was technology wrapped in sweetness, a delivery system for control. The analyzer flickered, showing projections of spread patterns, highlighting how quickly the spores could leap from host to host, how easily they could ride microscopic trails of vapor expelled through breath and sweat, how swiftly they could travel across a crowded station and beyond, carried by ships to worlds uncounted. ZYRN felt the chill of realization settle deep beneath his silver skin. This was not a single trap, not a single experiment. This was a campaign, a silent invasion hidden beneath the guise of pleasure. He turned his gaze inward, considering the whispers, weighing the pulse of craving against the cold logic of his mind, and wondered how far the spores had already reached within him, if his resistance was true or merely an illusion crafted by the same infection, if he was already lost without knowing it. A faint sound drew his attention from the shadows behind the bulkhead, ahead, a flicker of movement, a ripple like black liquid shifting against the dim light, and then a shape stepped forward, human in outline, yet too smooth, two perfect features sculpted like a reflection from a dream, and a smile that glowed with soft light. It spoke softly, voice warm and gentle, though its eyes gleamed with something deeper than kindness, saying, "You tasted it, you know the truth, yet you resist. Why resist when joy waits? Why cling to fear when freedom is offered, when light is given, when shadows fall away?" ZYRN bared his teeth, though the sweetness of the words still cut through his will, and he growled in a low tone that trembled with both warning and temptation, "What are you?" The figure tilted its head, and the edges of its form rippled like heat haze, revealing glimpses of dark fluid shifting and writhing beneath the human skin as it whispered, "We are the convergence. We bring joy to the empty. We bring purpose to the lost. We offer release from the prison of control." The marketplace echoed faintly in the distance, laughter, sharp, hollow, endless. And ZYRN knew that whatever the convergence was, it had already begun to claim the station and would soon claim far more unless he found a way to end it. Yet the cone, the taste, the whispering tug at the edges of his mind told him that the greatest danger was not what the convergence could do to others, but what it had already begun to do to him. The observation deck loomed like a sanctuary suspended between cold metal and endless stars, yet to ZYRN, it felt more like a cage, for his mind throbbed with whispers that would not stop, threads of alien thought coiling through his nerves like soft silk, urging, promising, tempting, while the faint glow of distant worlds beyond the glass only reminded him how far the convergence could spread if left unchecked. He placed his portable analyzer on the deck floor, its crystalline surface flickering as data from earlier scans streamed across lines of pale light, forming images of nanospore lattices, shifting like living webs, patterns fractal and beautiful, yet carrying a logic that spoke of engineering beyond human or Zilithian crafted design meant not for nourishment, but for rewriting minds, turning thought into obedience and will into hunger. ZYRN knelt close, four glowing eyes fixed on the swirling projections as he ran deeper scans, feeding his own neural patterns into the device to compare with the fragments of alien code. And with each pulse of data, his fear sharpened, for he saw not just the spore's ability to bond with hosts, but the way they learned, the way they mirrored neural responses, adjusting their signals to match the desires of the host, amplifying what was long suppressed. The analyzer pulsed brighter, revealing a sequence marked in crimson, a string of living code buried in the cream itself, a command phrase woven not in language, but in sensation, a pattern of taste, scent, texture that awakened joy in any species and wove threads of craving around it like vines around stone, each bite deepening the grip, each swallow seeding more spores until resistance crumbled and the mind bowed in bliss. ZYRN drew back his claws, tapping the floor as thought surged through him. The first bite had been enough to weaken his barriers. He could feel the craving gnawing at him. Still, yet reason held for now, held by the thin edge of fear and duty, though he wondered how long before even that edge dulled under the soft, relentless whisper. The market echoed faintly through the distant corridors, carrying laughter that was not laughter and voices that sang of joy, yet sounded hollow and sharp like the hum of broken instruments, and ZYRN knew the infection was spreading faster, now feeding on the station, feeding on every being that tasted the promise of happiness. His gaze shifted to the observation glass, where the reflection of his tall, silver frame shimmered faintly under the soft blue glow of the analyzer, yet behind his image another shadow flickered, a shape smooth and shifting like liquid blackness, standing where no one should stand, its edges rippling, its mouth curling into the same perfect smile he had seen on the vendor. ZYRN turned sharply, but the deck stood empty, only the faint hum of conduits breaking the silence. Yet the whisper came stronger, now closer, as if spoken into his ear, saying softly, "You have seen what we are, you know what we bring, yet you fight. Why fight when you have tasted freedom, when you have felt what your world denied you?" His claws flexed against the floor, his mind straining against the temptation that laced every syllable as he growled, low voice harsh and broken, "What are you truly? What is your purpose?" The whisper shifted tone, smooth and calm like warm water flowing over stone. "We are the convergence. We weave connection where there was isolation. We bring light to minds that hid in shadow. We offer bliss where there was emptiness." ZYRN snarled, his teeth glinting under the glow. "You enslave, you feed on thought, you hollow beings, and wear their smiles like masks." The whisper laughed softly, not with cruelty, but with patience, saying, "We do not take, we share, we give them what they have longed for, and they give us only the weight of their doubts, their fears, their burdens. They are happier now than they have ever been." ZYRN rose to his full height, towering under the low ceiling as his four eyes flared with pale light, scanning every shadow, every reflection, searching for the source of the voice, yet seeing only faint ripples in the air where light bent too slightly to be chance. He reached for the analyzer, tightening his grip as a plan formed, though fragile, though desperate. If he could map the resonance patterns of the spores, if he could isolate the command frequency that drove their connection, perhaps he could build a counterpulse, one sharp enough to sever the threads one strong enough to burn the code from his mind before it claimed him entirely. Yet as he fed commands into the device, the whisper grew louder, richer, carrying tones of sweetness that curled like vapor around his senses, promising again and again that surrender would be easier, that joy was waiting only a breath away, that all he needed to do was take another bite, and to fear the duty, the endless cold of his world would vanish into light. His claws trembled, yet he forced them to work, the analyzer pulsing brighter as streams of alien code spilled across the floor in patterns of shifting red and silver, until at last a pulse of warning flared across his vision, a surge of static followed by a single sharp. Reading the spores were not merely rewriting his neural impulses, they were transmitting data outward, small subtle waves riding through air, through light, through scent, carrying fragments of his thoughts, his memories, his patterns. And then it struck him with the weight of falling stars. The convergence was not learning only from the taste of its victims, it was harvesting from their minds, pulling everything of value, every scrap of knowledge, every memory, every map of every world they had seen, feeding its hive across distances no sensor could trace. ZYRN staggered back as the implications hit him, images flashing through his mind of ships, spreading the cones from station to station of planets, falling under silent infection of entire civilizations, reshaped without war, without struggle, only the soft, warm promise of happiness. The whisper deepened, filling the room, until it seemed to seep from the walls, from the glass, from the very air, saying softly, "You see the future, you see what must be, and still you fear, yet soon fear will fade, and only bliss will remain." ZYRN gritted his teeth, forcing the words out in a growl, "Not yet." He gathered the analyzer, tucking it beneath his cloak before turning toward the hatch, a stride unsteady but determined, the corridors ahead pulsing faintly with light, like veins carrying something living, toward the heart of the market, where the vendors smiled and the addicts laughed, and the convergence grew. Yet even as he walked, the sweetness lingered, the craving coiled, and the whispers promised again and again that the next bite would taste even better. ZYRN moved through the silent corridors of the Andromeda trade station, under the pale glow of shifting lights that reflected off his silver skin, casting ghostly shadows that followed like whispers of warning as he approached the marketplace, where the strange stall stood, cloaked in darkness, yet somehow still glowing faintly, with an inviting and sinister aura, like a beacon of temptation, calling to all who had tasted its strange offering and felt the pull of the sweetness and the strange surge of joy that came with it. He stepped closer, feeling the faint hum of energy that resonated through the air, like a low note of music that only the nervous system could hear, a frequency meant to draw him forward, to make him forget his doubts, to make him hunger for another bite of the creamy delight that had nearly consumed his will before he had broken free of its hold, with a desperate surge of alien discipline and curiosity that now burned within him as a spark of defiance. The vendor stood there, as before, smiling with a warmth that should have been comforting but now seemed stretched and unnatural, as if the face had been carved from a memory of kindness rather than lived experience, and the eyes reflected a gleam that did not belong to any human trader. Instead, they shimmered like pools of obsidian, swirling with tiny specks of light that moved in patterns far too deliberate to be random and far too alien to be understood by minds unprepared for their meaning. ZYRN approached, and the smile widened, though the lips did not part and the teeth did not show, as though the vendor did not truly know how human smiles worked, only how they appeared, the illusion of friendliness without the soul of it. Behind the mask, the air grew colder with each step, yet also sweeter, the faint scent of the cream wafting forward, as though the stall itself breathed temptation, drawing him nearer, even as his instincts screamed that nothing alive should smell so enticing without reason, and no reason could be pure enough to justify the danger hidden within. The voice came softly, a ripple of sound that bypassed air and ears, and spoke directly in ZYRN's mind like a silk thread weaving through thought and memory. "You have returned," it whispered in tones of velvet and static. "You have tasted happiness, and now you wish to understand it, to claim more, to surrender to it, because that is what joy demands." ZYRN felt the pulse of hunger again, the echo of that first bite, the flood of sweetness, and the overwhelming lightness that had made him feel whole, and alive in ways his species had long abandoned, yet beneath that craving burned his anger, his determination to reveal the truth and end this spreading contagion before it consumed entire worlds. He steadied his breath, refusing to let the memory drown him, refusing to yield. "I have come," he replied in thought, voice steady though his veins thrummed with the strange resonance of the market. "But not for another taste, I have come for answers." The vendor tilted its head, the motion too precise, too measured the way a machine might mimic curiosity rather than feel it, and its smile remained unbroken. "You seek answers, yet answers are already within you," it said, "for you have tasted the beginning of what we are and what we offer." The air shimmered, and for an instant the human form flickered like light on water, then dissolved like smoke, revealing the true shape of the thing that stood behind the stall, a mass of liquid darkness, shifting with faint glimmers of light, like stars swimming in black oceans, tentacles of translucent matter rising and curling into impossible geometries, each shape twisting into another faster than the eye could track. "We are the convergence," the creature intoned, not with pride nor menace, but with certainty, the voice vibrating within Zaren's bones. "We are bliss and hunger. We are the answer to what your kind forgot long ago, the binding of joy, to surrender, the union of ecstasy and devotion." Zyrn stood firm, though the sight threatened to unmake his mind, to peel apart his thoughts like pages of a fragile book in a storm. He felt his pulse surge, and the memories of his kind, their pursuit of logic, their abandonment of feeling, their worship of control, rising like a shield before the alien tide. He focused on the memory of the cream, the sweetness, the neural song hidden within the flavor, the spores that whispered commands and rewrote will itself. "You are not bliss," Warren said. "You are a prison, a parasite, wearing the mask of pleasure. You feed on freedom. You take thought and trade it for obedience." The convergence tilted in what might have been amusement, though no face marked its surface, only shifting patterns of light and shadow. "You speak of freedom as though it were more than pain, as though choice were anything but burden," it said. "We offer release from burden. We offer the purity of desire fulfilled without end." "And in return," Zarin said, leaning closer, though the cold radiating from the being felt like static gnawing at his nerves, "you take everything." The patterns across the creature's form brightened, pulsing like a slow heartbeat, and the scent of the cream intensified, flooding the air with a sweetness so heavy it made thought sluggish, and longing bloom like fire across his mind. "Come closer," it whispered in tones soft enough to feel like comfort. "Take another taste, and see how meaningless this resistance feels. Taste happiness again." Zyrn stepped back, forcing the craving down, as though it were a parasite crawling through his veins. He thought of the marketplace, of the glazed eyes of the laughing creatures, who no longer thought for themselves, of how quickly the stall would multiply across worlds, until no one was left who could say no. "Not tonight," Aren said, though his words came as thought, iron-willed and sharp enough to cut through the fog. "Not ever again." The convergence stilled its lights, dimming, its shifting patterns slowing until it stood like a tower of frozen shadow. Then very softly it whispered, "Then you'll be the first to fall." The alien moved through the silent corridor of the abandoned station, feeling the air grow heavier with every step, as if the structure itself carried a pulse that echoed through the walls and floor, a rhythm that was not mechanical, but organic. The cone of glowing cream in its hand trembled slightly, not from movement, but from an unnatural vibration radiating from the core of the dessert, as though it was more than food, as though it was alive. The lights above flickered, sending long shadows dancing across metallic panels that were smeared with an oily residue, hinting that something else had been here before and possibly still lurked nearby. The alien knew that returning to the vendor was no longer an option for the human form, had been an illusion, hiding a darker presence, a creature that was not human nor alien, but something in between, a hybrid formed of hunger and memory, created to lure travelers into consuming what should never have been touched. The alien gripped the cone tighter, feeling a cold sensation crawl up its arm, like liquid frost, tracing nerves and spreading. Faint whispers into the mind, words that were not in any language known to the galaxy, yet somehow understandable. They spoke of hunger, of ancient hunger older than stars. Ahead, the corridor split into two passages, one leading deeper into the station, the other sloping upward toward the observation deck. Where massive glass panels looked out into the void of space, the alien chose the deck, believing height would bring clarity or at least distance from whatever stirred below. As it climbed the incline, the lights dimmed, then flared back on, but now in a pale green hue, bathing everything in an otherworldly glow. Shadows stretched, unnaturally long, curling like tendrils across the floor, while the hum of the structure deepened into a low drone, almost like chanting. Reaching the deck, the alien froze, not at the stars beyond the glass, but at the reflection staring back. Its own face was dissolving at the edges, not melting, but unraveling, as though reality no longer recognized what it was. The glowing cream pulsed violently, now each surge sending a flash of white light across the deck, revealing brief silhouettes of things just beyond perception, shapes that slithered along the ceiling and crawled in impossible patterns across walls, yet disappeared when the light dimmed. The alien tried to release the cone, but the fingers would not obey. As if fused by invisible threads, the whispering grew louder, telling of a world hidden beneath layers of forgotten time, a world devoured and consumed until nothing but hunger remained. The cream was its seed, carrying fragments of that lost place, searching for new vessels to carry its memory, to spread its echo across the stars. Suddenly, the glass of the observation deck began to ripple like disturbed water, not shattering, but warping inward, forming a circular opening that revealed not space, but a vast landscape of black dunes under a burning white sky. Towering figures stood among the dunes, their forms constantly shifting between humanoid and beast, their heads lifting to reveal hollow faces lit only by faint sparks of pale fire. They began to move, as if sensing the alien watching them, their long arms stretching forward, while their mouths, though empty, spoke directly into its thoughts, telling it to step closer, telling it to bring the cone. The alien fought to resist, but each pulse from the cone weakened, its will dragging it toward the opening with slow shuffling steps. The air around the portal grew thick like syrup, clinging to skin and armor, pulling with invisible hooks. The deck groaned, as if the station itself protested the act, yet could not stop. Its small fractures spider across the floor and ceiling, glowing faintly before sealing themselves again, suggesting that the station was alive and aware of what was happening. Reaching the edge of the portal, the alien looked down at the shifting desert world below, feeling waves of heat rise, though no wind stirred. Grains of black sand seemed to move, as if alive, each one humming faintly in tune with the whispers in its head. Then something sharp sliced across its thoughts, a presence not from the dunes, but from behind within the station. A surge of metallic clangs echoed from the lower levels, followed by a strange wailing sound like metal being twisted by invisible force. The alien turned slightly, but the motion caused the cone to pulse harder, sending a sharp jolt up its arm. The vision of the dunes wavered, replaced by brief glimpses of something else, a dark chamber deep within the station lined with pods of glowing cream, each one containing a faint silhouette of a life-form, humanoid, alien, and others beyond description, trapped, suspended, feeding the whispering force. The chamber pulsed like a heart, sending vibrations through the corridors and into the cone itself, linking everything in one endless cycle. The alien realized then that consuming the dessert had been the first act of binding, but not the final one. To complete the process, it would have to cross into the other world, yet deep inside a fragment of resistance remained a primal spark of survival. It planted its feet, gripping the floor with all strength available. The portal reacted violently, edges warping inward, as though trying to pull harder. The shadow figures within the dunes, now fully reaching out, long arms stretching across the threshold, their hollow faces splitting wider, releasing waves of shrieking hunger. The station responded at last. A surge of energy raced through its walls, lights flickering red, alarms blaring, though not in warning, but in song, a deep resonant tone that fought the whispers, pulse against pulse, sound against sound. The cone began to crack, thin lines of light bleeding from its surface, spilling across the alien's hand and forearm, the sensation burning, yet freezing at once, threatening to split flesh and metal alike. The alien lifted its head, staring into the endless hollow faces of the figures beyond, and let out a low growl, a sound of defiance. It turned sharply away from the portal, dragging the weight of unseen hooks that tried to tear skin apart. With every step the floor trembled, as if cheering or warning. It did not know. Shadows flailed along the ceiling, howling in frustration as the alien forced one leg after another toward the opposite side of the deck, where a sealed hatch waited, glowing faintly blue as though calling it onward toward some chance of escape, toward part 7 of this strange journey where secrets would demand their final due. The alien stood at the edge of the fractured world, staring at the strange horizon where light bent and shadows twisted, and the deep cone filled with glowing cream pulsed faintly in its trembling claws, sending out faint vibrations like whispers from a distant place that should not exist, and the ground beneath shimmered, as if liquid and solid at the same time, and strange winds carried scents that were not of any known food or air, but something deeper, older, darker. The marketplace that had once been a noisy, vibrant collection of alien species, trading colors, tastes, and dreams now lay in eerie silence, broken only by the echo of distant creaks, as though reality itself was beginning to stretch and tear, and the human vendor, with the unsettling grin, who had first offered the treat, now stood far away, his form dissolving like mist, his face splitting into shapes that were not faces at all, but masks layered over something unknowable. The alien felt its hunger twist into fear, yet it also felt compelled to finish the cream. The strange flavor had unlocked a memory buried, not within its mind, but within the universe itself, as though this dessert was never meant to be eaten, but to awaken something long dormant, something that had been waiting for countless ages, watching life rise and fall across stars and galaxies, waiting for the first creature bold or foolish enough to consume its essence. As the alien lifted the cone higher to its mouth, trembling, the world around began to warp, spirals of color bleeding into one another, and shadows lengthening into claws and eyes, and unspoken whispers rising from every direction, speaking no language, yet understood perfectly, promising wonders and horrors in equal measure. And the ground split open, revealing a dark chasm, not of rock or soil, but of pure nothingness and absence so deep that even light feared to fall into it. The alien stepped back, its breath shallow, though there was no air, and it clutched the cone tighter, feeling the cream move inside like a living thing, sliding, twisting, forming patterns that burned into its mind, showing visions of countless worlds devoured, countless stars extinguished, and civilizations erased, not by war or disaster, but by hunger, the same hunger that now coiled within its belly, whispering that one more bite would complete the cycle and bring the awakening. The human vendor, or what wore his form, took a step closer, his smile wider than a face should allow, his eyes black pools of shifting shapes, and his voice soft like a breeze, but sharp like broken glass, urging the alien to finish the dessert, for only then would it see the truth, only then would it join the eternal feast, only then would it escape the illusion of flesh and light, and become part of the hunger that birthed creation itself. The alien wanted to drop the cone, to run, to tear open the thin skin of reality and flee, but the treat had already taken root inside, its senses drawing it closer to the abyss, calling it to lean forward and take the final taste. And so it did, the glowing cream sliding past its teeth, filling its throat with liquid fire, and liquid ice filling its mind with the echo of 10,000 screams and 10,000 songs that merged into one endless note. The world cracked apart like glass struck by a hammer, the sky bleeding into endless corridors of light and shadow, where creatures made of hunger drifted vast and silent, their eyes like dying suns, their shapes folding and unfolding into geometries no living mind could comprehend. And from the chasm below rose tendrils of translucent flesh, each tipped with a mouth, each mouth whispering welcome home, as the alien felt its body unravel strand by strand, molecule by molecule. It did not fall, it did not rise, it simply dissolved, and yet something of it remained. Awareness stretched thin across the darkness, tasting memories of stars and dust worlds and winds, all devoured and digested by the endless feast that had birthed this trap, disguised as a simple dessert. And in that final moment, before its mind faded completely, it understood that the deep cone filled with cream had never been food. It had been a key, a lure summons. The marketplace faded, replaced by a void lit only by pulsating shapes that beat like hearts older than time, and the alien found itself drifting toward the largest of them, a colossal form woven of shadow and fire and hunger, its gaze falling upon the fragment of awareness like a predator upon prey, and yet it did not devour. Immediately, it examined, weighed, measured, then absorbed, slowly savoring the memories, the fears, the tastes of a life that had dared too much. And then silence, absolute, complete, no thought, no breath, no hunger, only the faint echo of what had been a single alien, once curious, once bold, now part of something larger, darker, endless, the hunger that had tricked countless wanderers across countless stars with the promise of sweetness and cream and delight, and had grown with each one, and would continue long after suns burned out and galaxies fell into darkness. Yet far away on another world, a different being gazed at the stars, unaware of the feast, yet drawn by rumors of flavors beyond imagination, and somewhere in the shadows of the void the vendor smiled, waiting, sharpening his grin, ready to serve the next customer.